The Ashfall calendar said we were 6 years, 3 months, and 19 days into the dim era when I met the myth hunters outside the gutted museum. They had set up camp where fossilized skeletons once hung beneath skylights, now buried under scabrous soot. Their faces were streaked with lampblack and polar cream. Their voices carried a missionary tremor. They asked if I had come to join them on the next expedition west, toward a place someone called the Terrace Steppe and Upland, allegedly, where dawn had punched a silver keyhole through the cloud ceiling. I told them I was just passing, collecting interviews for a photo essay about belief under perpetual dusk. I did not add that I considered them another variety of doomed pilgrim, like the ones who trudged north the year before, chasing rumors of a thawing sea. They didn't mind my skepticism. In fact, they seemed to savor it. Skeptics, said their leader, a reed-thin woman named Derry Gatland, made the best witnesses once converted. She offered me dried goosefoot and a tin cup of diffused tea. Around us, scavenged solar panels still useless leaned against cracked marble. A comfortless wind rattled banners that once proclaimed, "Edge of the sun, a celebration of light." Someone had knifed away the final word, leaving only edge of the. Nightfall was a mood rather than a moment now. The brightness gradient from afternoon to midnight could be measured on a single grayscale strip. But the myth hunters insisted they could feel the difference between true night and false night. "Listen," Derry told me, "when the real sun tries, you can hear the ash flakes hiss." I had spent the week photographing hollow playgrounds and church basements converted into vitamin D dispensaries. My editor wanted portraits of hope's slow erosion, and the myth hunters were perfect specimens. Yet something in Derry's certainty snagged at me. I'd rebelled against my parents' brand of glow-stick spirituality, and I'd built a career on debunking illusion, but I couldn't deny the dull ache in my sternum whenever I recalled the taste of authentic daylight on skin. The next dawn, I followed them. We moved in silence through a landscape the color of engine sludge. Every few kilometers we encountered another shrine, a melted traffic signal, a child's bike, a pile of prayer stones placed with improbable neatness. The hunters tallied each testament, marking coordinates on a laminated atlas. Derry told me their growing map of offerings outlined a spiral, pointing to the place where earth and sky had last conspired to let light slip through. She cited testimonies: a shepherd who saw his shadow briefly, a drone pilot who captured overexposed footage before soldiers confiscated the memory card, a blind woman whose assistive implant registered Lux event on its sensor log. I asked why none of this evidence had reached the networks. Derry gave a crooked smile. "Governments prefer manageable despair," she said. "Despair motivates compliance. Hope invites questions." I'd heard similar claims from other fringe communities, solar cults, reflector fanatics, weather librarians. Usually their conspiracy rhetoric collapsed under archival scrutiny, but when night is nearly absolute, cataloging anomalies becomes sedition. After the supervolcano chains erupted Tambora's grandchildren, as the geologists nicknamed them, every nation reorganized itself around scarcity management. Energy quotas, mobility permits, and information ceilings became as routine as ration bars. Official directives praised resilience while quietly discouraging speculation about reversal. Scientists who once modeled atmosphere recovery timelines were drafted into agronomy divisions and told to engineer crops that germinated under floodlights. We traveled for 4 days, sleeping in fractured barns or drainage culverts. I photographed everything: the chalk tally marks on bridge abutments, the lurid graffiti "Let There Be Light," the hunters' delirious expressions as they sampled horizon smudges with photometers. My digital archive ballooned, yet each frame looked interchangeable, a charcoal world, figures sealed in parkas. The sameness lulled me into believing nothing could ever rupture the gray. On the 5th evening, one of the junior hunters, a boy named Janir, raced ahead, shouting. I followed their scramble over a ridge of igneous rubble. Beyond it lay the Terrace Steppe, shelves of ancient farmland carved into a mountainside, now dusted in vitreous ash that glittered under our headlamps. Derry planted a pole bearing a broken mirror and checked her wrist barometer. "Pressure drop," she whispered. "The umbrella's thinning." They bivouacked with unusual urgency, calibrating instruments, unfurling blank mylar sheets to maximize any stray photon capture. I set up my tripod more out of habit than conviction, aiming the lens toward the east. Clouds churned like wet cement, wind sharpened. Somewhere above, I imagined irradiated aerosols negotiating a brief truce. At 3:17 by the world-coordinated oscillation clock, it happened. A fissure opened in the cloud deck, thin as a paper cut, almost vertical. Through that slit emerged a blade of white so vivid my pupils stumbled. It sliced across the terraces, touched a bramble of dead vines, and incinerated the rime left by freezing drizzle. Steam rose in serpents. The beam lasted maybe 8 seconds, long enough for a groan to escape my throat, long enough for my shudder to clap 5 times. When darkness snapped back, everyone was screaming or praying or laughing. Janir sobbed, clutching his forearm where the light had grazed bare skin, leaving a coin-sized rose of first-degree burn, a sacred stigma to the others. I toggled through my camera's preview, 5 exposures, each showing the beam sharpening, widening, then dissolving. Histogram spikes crowded the right margin, genuine saturation, proof of luminosity orders of magnitude above our usual gloom. I tried to remain the detached documentarian, yet my hands shook so hard the viewfinder jittered. Derry approached, face slick with tears. "Now you know," she said. I nodded, unable to articulate the seismic reordering inside my head. In that moment, I wanted the entire world to see these frames, not blurred rumors, not confiscated hearsay. Clarity so undeniable, the bureaucrats would have to abandon narrative control. I offered to transmit the files immediately via SatLink, but Derry stopped me. "We need to curate the release," she argued. "Hope requires choreography, or the old powers will stomp it out. Give us 48 hours to assemble corroboration." I didn't like it. Journalistic reflex warned me that delaying proof invited its disappearance. Still, I agreed to hold back a day, not out of faith but from a nascent solidarity I didn't yet understand. We packed up, intending to hike toward a relay tower at Hamlin Pass. We never reached it. Near dawnless noon, a quadcopter whined overhead, not one of the scavenger drones locals cobbled together. This bore the matte insignia of the Multinational Atmospheric Stabilization Coalition, colloquially, the Orderlies. It circled twice, then retreated west. 30 minutes later, 2 troop transports, draped in pixelated charcoal camo, thundered down the valley, rotor wash flattening the sulfur-stunted grass. Soldiers disembarked wearing rebreather masks with tinted visors. Their commander spoke through a bullhorn. "You are within a controlled volatility zone. Prepare for inspection." The orderly's charter granted them extrajudicial authority wherever climate security operations were deemed essential. Resistance equaled sabotage. They herded us onto our knees, confiscated electronics, and scanned each device for disruptive content. When the lieutenant paused over my camera, his visor reflected my own pale face. He scrolled the playback thumbnails until the beam image glared. He exhaled, a hiss in his respirator. Without comment, he wiped the SD card with a portable shredder. Just a beep, and my 5 miracles became a smear of randomized bits. I stifled a cry, but rage pulsed, molten. The soldiers turned to the hunter's cache of instruments. They smashed spectrometers, detonated the mirror pull with a shaped charge, and poured solvent on Derry's atlas until the pages peeled like dead skin. Officially, they sought to prevent misleading optimism events. Unmanaged hope, they believed, could spark migrations, riots, suicides of disappointment. Before departing, the lieutenant delivered a script. Refrain from disseminating unverified solar anomalies. Atmospheric darkout remains indefinite. Trust sanctioned briefings. Then they vanished into ashfall. All that night the hunters mourned louder than I'd heard any funerary keening. Janir vomited charcoal water from shock and pain, his burn blistered, proof of what we'd lost. I wandered a perimeter circle, clutching my useless camera. Grief fused with fury until some internal latch flipped. They had deleted pixels, but they had not lobotomized my eyes. I possessed 2 organic archives retinas still smoldering with afterimage. I spent hours describing the beam into my voice recorder, layering audio notes, angle, breadth, luminance, the way vapor curled. Eyewitness testimony felt like Stone Age tech, but I meant to weaponize every syllable. By dawn or whatever, a plan incubated. Data erased in one place might still survive in the camera's buffer. Some models cached thumbnails in internal memory independent of the card. I dismantled the chassis with a multi-tool. Inside, a microchip no larger than a fingernail stored low-resolution previews. Tiny, compressed, but unmistakably images. I extracted the chip, soldered a crude interface using scavenged wire, and dumped the contents onto my wrist pad. There they were, ghost versions of the beam, 320 by 240 pixels, time-stamped. Not exhibition quality, yet strong enough to corroborate testimony. I felt my lungs inflate fully for the first time in years. Derry watched me work. Her despair tightened into renewed resolve. "They'll come back searching," she said. "We need redundancy." We split tasks. The hunters carved the beam pattern into planks, then inked it on fabric scraps. Janier volunteered his burnt arm as living poster. I embedded the thumbnails, plus my spoken chronicle, into steganographic layers of old pop songs, then beamed them across pirate Hamnet's mesh arrays that leapt anonymously from solar balloon to derelict comm tower. The orderlies monitored major satellite traffic, but Hamnets were like fungi, thriving in the cracks. Within 24 hours, replies pinged. A network of coastal hydroponicists mirrored the files. A choir collective in the free Arctic promised to project the images during their solstice vigil. Each node that copied the data appended a digital salutation. "Salutations from the dark, we see what you saw." 2 days later, the first crackdown reports arrived. Orderly patrols raided market squares where people had gathered around printed screenshots. In one township, soldiers fired warning rounds into the air, killing no one but scattering the crowd. The official communique framed it as dispersal of destabilizing congregation. Yet the seed kept sprouting. For every print confiscated, 3 more appeared, traced by hand, drawn in soot on shuttered storefronts. Children scrawled beams on the backs of ration cards. Someone hacked municipal PA systems, replacing the nightly resilience mantra with a field recording of our breathless gasps at 317.I. I traveled with a small splinter group eastward, uploading wherever we found bandwidth. Derry led another contingent south, ferrying physical copies to settlements too remote for net signals. We agreed on no hierarchy, only a rhythm of rendezvous beacons. Stateless hope flourished precisely because it lacked a single head to sever. A month blazed past, figuratively. The sky remained iron. Orderly bulletins grew frantic. They labeled us photo-cultists, solar hoaxers, psychological threat group Delta. They circulated doctored footage of our camp, supposedly faking the beam with arc lamps. Their edit quality was clumsy. Even jaded citizens sniffed propaganda. Rumors surfaced that some soldiers had seen our images and defected, smuggling seeds and antibiotics to enclaves previously written off as non-essential. Meanwhile, scientists inside sealed research centers began leaking memos. Satellite spectrographs, they claimed, had registered ozone churn in a manner consistent with thinning ash plumes. Administrators buried the findings, but junior analysts slipped them onto the darknet. Cross-referencing our timestamp correlation wasn't proof, but it fed a crescendo. My own notoriety mushroomed. People circulated grainy selfies with me, calling me Suncatcher. I felt flattered, terrified, disoriented. I reminded interviewers that a camera alone didn't shift the sky. Thousands of stubborn hearts did. Yet cults grow around symbols, and soon someone carved my profile into pumice, haloed by the beam. I feared idolatry would divert focus from the phenomenon itself. Then came the ultimatum broadcast. At 20 o'clock UTC, screens across all coalition territories flickered to an emblem, a stylized eclipse. The High Assembly chairman addressed citizens of our shared crisis. He acknowledged scattered sun phenomena, but labeled them temporary, localized aberrations, not indicative of systemic recovery. Disseminating contrary narratives henceforth constituted eco-terrorism. Violators would face neutralization. Infrastructure nodes doubling as propaganda points were designated no-go zones, subject to aerial cleansing. Translation: speak of sunlight, die. The speech backfired. People had already tasted forbidden brightness secondhand. Confiscation could not untaste it. Underground broadcasters looped the chairman's speech alongside our micro-video, letting viewers decide. Defections soared. In one port city, dock workers refused to unload a shipment of phosphate munitions until monitors replayed the beam on public screens. The standoff ended with soldiers lowering weapons, tears streaking their respirators. Pressure built toward a singular outcome. Either the sky must deliver another beam soon, fortifying belief, or the movement would fracture under the weight of anticipation. I tried to manage expectations whenever I spoke, emphasizing uncertainty. Nature, I said in an interview recorded inside an abandoned theater, isn't obliged to perform on schedule. Our fight is for the freedom to await her encore without censorship. Privately, I feared that 8-second miracle might remain singular for decades. Nevertheless, the act of collective watching standing on rooftops, fields, bridges, became a ritual that rewired society. People synchronized clocks to the terraced step event, not the ashfall calendar. Communities adjusted labor shifts so everyone could gather at potential break hours. Even if darkness prevailed, those gatherings yielded conversation, empathy, barter deals, quiet revolutions in micro-governance. One frigid evening in early year 7, I found myself atop a silo with Junior, his car, now a sunburst tattooed in yellow ink. He asked whether I regretted unleashing the images, knowing the chaos that followed. I studied the floor lights of a distant village, dots pulsing like oxygen in a bloodstream. Regret? I said. No. Fear? Yes. Responsibility? Definitely. But regret? Only if the next generation never sees the real thing for themselves. He pointed to the horizon where an almost imperceptible paleness seeped through the usual graphite. Then let's keep aiming our lenses. During the following weeks, instruments worldwide began detecting incremental upticks in solar irradiance, still Phoeban, yet unmistakable. The orderlies tried to cap the story, but the data had metastasized beyond containment. Urban glow bunkers experimented with opening skylights for measured intervals. Some crops showed bursts of photosynthetic revival. The question shifted from will the sun return to how do we live ethically with its return. Governments attempted to pivot, rewriting narratives to position themselves as orchestrators of the comeback. Archival records, however, bore time codes they couldn't massage. The deletion orders, the raids, the ultimatum broadcast. People had recorded them, duplicated them endlessly. Trust holes gaped too wide for cosmetic patching. Historians will argue about which factor mattered most: atmospheric dynamics, volcanic dormancy, or the viral hope sparked by one unauthorized photograph. I can't calibrate causality. I know only that events shook loose because we refused sanctioned despair. The beam gifted us not certainty, but possibility. Possibility coaxed action. Action bent probabilities. Actions re-engaged action. Action bent probabilities. Possibility. Sometime during year 8, the first true sunrise since the eruption spread across the hemisphere like spilled milk, blazing into peach. Trees that had survived as skeletal outlines suddenly painted themselves green. A chorus of birds hatched in nests no one had believed would ever cradle eggs again. I watched from a hillside littered with the husks of orderly drones repurposed into wind chimes. Thousands around me stood silent until the light touched their upturned faces. Then a roar rose, equal parts jubilation and grief for the years lost. I lifted my camera, captured frame after frame, pixels drowning in daylight that no authority could confiscate, because it poured everywhere, into every sensor and optic nerve. I've often wondered what became of the lieutenant who wiped my card. Perhaps he knelt somewhere beneath this same sunrise, helmet removed, eyes raw, understanding too late that suppressing hope cannot eclipse the star itself. Hope, like photons, travels even through vacuum. Obstruct one vector and it simply diffracts. Tonight I develop prints. In a dark room for the pleasure of using the word dark as metaphor rather than environment. On my table lie two images. The grainy thumbnail that survived the purge and a new photograph from this morning. High resolution. Clouds pinking at the edges. Children squinting. I lay them side by side, the before and the beyond, the seed and the bloom. I will donate them to the rebuilt museum, where skylights have been scrubbed clear and the banner once again reads, "A celebration of light." Some visitors will whisper myths about the time when daylight was a rumor, when truth climbed from exile on the backs of myth hunters and a skeptical photographer who became believer by necessity. Others will argue the facts. Let them. The argument itself is proof of freedom. Outside those walls, the sun continues its ordinary miracle, indifferent to our stories, yet inextricable from them, suppressing in lenses, daring anyone, anywhere, to try suppressing it again.